A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored in part by the original Notali and Son, serving the Chicagoland area since 1947. The family that has taken pride in offering Italian sausages to many of their loyal customers over the years, and which have expanded a product line to their top-rated submarine sandwiches, hot foods, sauces, pastas, and a full catering menu. The store has passed on from grandfather to son, but has kept with the traditions of offering excellent quality at a great value using the finest ingredients and excellent service. Discover the difference at the original Notali and Son, 7652 West Belmont Avenue. And don't forget, it's their only location. And now, on to our episode. Good evening and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. And again tonight, thrilled to have on the two gentlemen that I love having on my show here. And it's going to be Tony and Carl Ruzicka. Tony and Carl have been on the show a couple of times, but we've talked about topics before. Two of the topics that we talked about the first time were about the great book, The Twins, A Journey of a Lifetime, their journey through Chicago sports and their history and their recollections of the bygone era. And this is the book, again, by Tony and Carl Ruzicka. And we got some great pictures on that book of Luckman, Hallis, Ditka, Bobby Hull, and of course, Chico Maki is our story tonight, because there are so many things in the book to cover. And when I have gotten together with Carl and Tony, one of them, of course, is that I cherish, is a player that I loved growing up. And tonight we are going to talk about, I'm going to put the word in front of it, and I hope you guys don't disagree, the legendary Chico Maki, one of the unsung heroes of the Chicago Blackhawks. Good evening, Tony. Good evening, Carl. And what is going on, both of you? I'll let one of you start with you guys these days.
Well, Carl, I'll let you start.
Well, doing great, and looking forward to talking about our history with Chico.
Great. Tony, what's going on with you?
Well, just helping out a few not-for-profit friends and clients.
Yes, Carl keeps me abreast of how you guys...
Eventually going to start hammering away again on a gun control idea that I've got, but it'll be a topic of another day.
Great, great. So let's talk about Chico, of course, number 16, Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, a lot of people don't know that his real name was actually Ronald Patrick, but got the nickname Chico. Do you guys know how he got that nickname Chico? Did he ever say anything to you guys?
His mother loved the Marx Brothers.
Oh.
And her favorite Marx brother was Chico Marx.
Chico Marx, yes. Well, yeah, because I always wondered myself, how did he get it? Maybe I thought he got it in the minors or when he was at St. Catherine's and everything else. He really has what I call a career of, it's that era again, like you guys write in the book, that bygone era. Do you guys both, and this question I'll address to Tony, do you remember right around the first times you met Chico Maki?
Sort of. I mean, not exactly, but we basically went to his house in Berwyn. And first we went to the first floor, which is the landlord, the maids, right, Carl? The name?
Right.
And they said, no, he lives upstairs in the attic. Go around through the gangway and ring the doorbell in the back.
Tony, how big was this apartment? I know Carl has mentioned it to me. How big was this apartment? Was it off of a house in Berwyn? What was on top of the...
yeah, it was the very top. Right.
Yeah. So this wasn't the Hyatt house.
No, there were basically a porch, and I think 2 bedrooms and a kitchen.
Wow, incredible.
And a bathroom.
Yeah, and a bathroom. That's the way we remember it, right?
And Carl,
so he invited us in, and we just struck up a friendship. So
right, and I mean, just ringing this doorbell, going about your business, right? And
so John, the journey had originally started because a picture of Pierre Palat was in the Cicero Berwyn Life newspaper, and the tagline was Pierre Palat Berwyn resident.
Oh, wow.
From our book, the subtitle Recollections of a Bygone Era.
Sure.
Part of the bygone era is that we looked in the phone book and there was a listing for Pierre Palat, 2813 South Ridgeland. All right.
Right.
So we originally went to Pierre Palat. Pierre Palat sent us to Glen Hall. Glen Hall sent us to Living Together. These are all in South Berwyn.
Sure.
With Stan Makita and Bobby Hull. And they sent us to Jerry Melnick, was a winger.
Right.
He only played 1 year with the Blackhawks. And this was 1962. So the year after the Stanley Cup. And Tony and I were 13 years old. And, we got autographed picture postcards from everybody. And Jerry Melnick says, well, I have another teammate across the street.
Right.
Really? So,
Yeah.
Chico Maki, so it's literally right across the street.
Right across the street. I got to ask both of you before we move on. I'm seeing that a Thomas Ruzicka is trying to come into the zone here.
That's our brother, so.
Is he trying to get on? Because it's
I had no idea.
Yeah, he's more than welcome to come on, but I know that Tom's trying to get on. So to our audience, if Tom comes on, more the merrier. I have to ask you, I mean, after that first meeting, I know it's the early 60s. It would be like a young 13-year-old meeting an athlete of today. Oh, there's Tom Ruzicka.
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, Tom is the other brother, of course, of Carl and Tony. Tom, welcome to the podcast this evening.
The older brother.
Can he hear us?
He's on mute, probably.
Yeah, he's on mute. We'll have to see if we can get him in. But anyway, just to go back, so just from that first recollection of him, Chico, did you have like that good vibe, that good feeling that, wow, what a great person? Here's a professional hockey player.
Yeah.
Tony, what do you remember just after that then?
Well, just he was real kind to us and took an interest in us. We would talk hockey, we would just talk family, we'd talk about a lot of stuff. Right. So we just kept going back.
Yeah, exactly. So this is 62.
Wife was very nice to us.
Yeah, this is 62, 63.
This is the year after the Stanley Cup.
Right, after the, and I noticed really that is basically really his first year where he really puts a dent into the roster, because the year before that, I think he only played in about 16 games, and that year I noticed he plays pretty much the full NHL schedule of about 65 games. So now he becomes this a veteran. I have to ask you both something about Chico, and again, I don't think Tom's audio's on, and I don't think Tom can hear us.
I think it is now. Do you hear me?
There he is. There he is.
Right.
Okay, Tom. Good to
Took me a while.
Tom, we're visiting tonight about the legendary Chico Maki, correct? So
yes, I do.
I'll try to get all four of you in, but I want to ask you a question. I read something, and maybe it's a misprint, but I noticed that Chico made the All-Star team in 61, 71, and 72. I don't think he makes the All-Star team in 61, does he?
61, he only played, he suited up for two of the Stanley Cup playoff games.
Right.
And got his name on the Stanley Cup just by suiting up for the games.
Yeah, and of course, if you look at the 1960-61 picture of the Stanley Cup champions, he is in the back row standing next to Stan Makita.
Right.
In that picture. And actually, the goaltender who didn't play in that series too, Dennis DeJordy, is on the lower right with Glenn Hall on the left. Yeah, in that picture.
So you got to remember, John, that so we're 13 years old. We're certainly aware of Bobby Hull and Stan Makita and Glenn Hall, but Chico now is roughly it's a rookie for that year, and we didn't know too much about him, and we didn't know too much about Jerry Melnick either, but we knew he was a Blackhawk.
Exactly.
And for that, we were very interested. And when we went by Chico Maki, it was just sort of like we we hit it off.
Sure,
So-
sure.
So, you know, we went to many of the Blackhawk stars' homes
Yes.
one time. Chico Maki, we went hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times. Yeah. Basically, now this becomes, just somebody that you could really be relaxed with. And Tom Ruzicka, if you can hear me, what's your recollections of those early Chico years through your brother's eyes?
Well, basically, most of those years I was away at school, but I would hear the stories and how they loved being over and meeting with him, and how welcome he was to them, and how many other players he introduced them to one by one until it became a fairly large group, guys, of about
Right.
5 or 6 you became very close to. But you were talking the 61. He only played 2 games in 61
Right.
with the Blackhawks. He was in the minors, but for that other time. But I think what he did is he suited up for 2 games for the playoffs over there for that that year.
You know, and again, because of how we are structured nowadays in the life, I'll go back to Tony for a sec. How were your parents when you come home and you say, hey, Mom and Dad, we met this real nice guy who is a professional hockey player who plays for the Chicago Blackhawks named Chico Maki. What was their mindset? Because, you know, even then there had to be that fear of, who is this, correct?
Well, I don't think they ever really concerned. You know, they trusted us
Right.
that we weren't gonna get involved with somebody that we shouldn't be involved with.
Exactly.
And we would always keep them in the loop as to what was going on.
Right.
So they were supportive. My dad wasn't truly a hockey fan, really didn't know too much about it. Neither did my mom, for that matter.
Right.
So,
right.
you know, but they were from Berwyn and we were in Cicero. So how bad could they be?
Right. Carl.
Well, we came home and says, you know, we just went to Chico Maki's house, and both our mom and dad, I'm sure they said, who?
Yeah, who's Chico Maki? Right, exactly. Right, exactly. Question, and anybody can answer this. Sometimes I'll direct it, and sometimes I'll just ask it. But Berwyn, of course, is Berwyn for the Blackhawks? Because I heard even Bobby Hall lived in Melrose and everything else, and Berwyn and all these suburbs. Berwyn being the closest, kind of nicest suburb from West Madison. Is this why it attracted some of these players, or did the Blackhawks brass like Wirtz and, let's say at that time, Tommy Ivan say? I'm sure they had people to say, okay, we have places, rental homes in Berwyn. How does Berwyn become like kind of the place for them?
Well, I would say there's 2 things. One, the Wirtz distillery or whatever it is was on 31st and Central, roughly. All right, in Cicero.
Okay.
My second thing is that Ogden Avenue had a direct route to Paulina, so they could get to the game without ever having to take the expressway.
Right. That's a great point by you, because I forgot that Ogden was like, Ogden is the Angle Street, correct?
Right.
Basically,
well, all the years that we were there, we didn't know anyone of the Hawks that really took the Eisenhower. You know, they would always just take Ogden.
Yeah, they weren't coming from the highfalutin suburbs of Naperville and Elmhurst then in those days, right? Yeah, exactly. Tom,
Chico also told us that, you know, on the bulletin board in the stadium clubhouse, you know, they're listing possible places to rent in Berwyn.
Gotcha.
So he just took a couple names off of that list and checked them out.
Wow. Okay. But I mean, Berwyn was still a lot of families were in Berwyn in those years.
Berwyn was actually a step up from Cicero. That's probably why they went to Berwyn, right?
To Berwyn, yeah, right. No, right. That's a for sure, Tom. That's a for sure. Tom, with you being away, were you able to know what was going on in those days with you being away from Chicago? Were you able to know in those days that, hey, okay, how are the Blackhawks doing? Of course, now these two act as your YouTube is in your Google by when you would call the house, but were you on the cusp of what was going on with, let's say, we'll just keep it on the Blackhawks now?
Well, we didn't have all the, the social media and follow through and so on, but I would keep track by talking with them some. But going back just a little bit before they even got involved with Chico and so on, when the Blackhawks would bring 200 to 500 or 700 people to a game, there were no fans back in the late 50s before Bobby Hull came in. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember going with friends and we would sit anywhere we wanted to because there was nobody there.
It was, honestly, between the three of you, it was that empty.
Yes.
For a place that housed 16,000 people.
Right.
Tony, your recollection too, like
Oh,
your
yeah,
brother Tom?
Yeah. But
Okay, so let's break it down this way.
Changed though when Bobby Hull came in.
Of course, yeah.
Yes,
let's break
did.
it down this way. I do want to get more into the cusp of Chico's career, but we'll end it with this in the way of the talking about this. What was a box seat, let's say, from 1962 to 66 in the old stadium?
I've got it in the book, but I don't remember. I'd say roughly $5 or something.
$5, but $5 was a lot of money. I mean, for that
Not
time
really.
period. For a game, I'm saying for a game.
Yeah.
My father would think $5 would be a lot now for standing room. So, but Carl, you're
that $5 then would probably be worth about $40 now.
right.
And you can't buy a ticket for $40.
There's no way. There's no way.
Right.
But I remember my mom always saying that $10 she brought home 4 bags of groceries.
Right.
But Carl, your recollection too. I mean,
we weren't that interested in hockey at the
Sure.
beginning. Our interest really took off when we befriended Chico. All right, but we would go with some of our grade school friends. Maybe we were 4th, 5th grade, and
Sure.
The Blackhawks star was Eddie Litzenberger.
Yeah, the captain.
All right, and they had Ted Lindsay, had been with Detroit, and Todd Sloan. So we'd watch those guys, and it would be pretty much like our brother Tom says, you pretty much sit wherever you wanted to.
Was Vasco then with him, or did he come later?
Just at the beginning.
Yeah,
Elmer Vasco, the big defenseman.
Right.
So I got to ask you, Chico starts his career actually under Rudy Polis, and then of course Polis gets replaced by Billy Ray.
Correct.
That was the long time. How was Chico right from the start with Bobby Hull? Do you remember? Because I feel that Chico Maki made Bobby Hull famous. We'll get into that. But was Chico always with Bobby Hull?
At the beginning, he was with Bobby Hull. It was Bobby Hull, Phil Esposito, and Chico Maki was the hemline.
The hemline. Okay.
And later on in his career, he sometimes was with Bobby Hull. When Bobby Hull left, of course, he went to the World Hockey Association. It certainly wasn't on the line with them then. But
yeah, right.
Even when Bobby Hull was still on the Blackhawks, a lot of times Chico was relegated to the 3rd or 4th line.
Got it. Tony, you remember Chico? A question for you. You remember Chico always being this hardworking winger, working in the corners?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was a phenomenal defensive player, which was very important at the time because Bobby Hull didn't play a lot of defense.
No.
So Chico was always the backup guy. And, he scored a lot of points, but nowhere near the amount he would have scored if he was not protecting Bobby Hull. I'll put it that way.
I think
Bobby Hull recognized that too and gave him credit for it.
Oh, yes. Over the years when they were both alive, I have to say it.
Right.
Before I ask Tom a question, there should be a stat called how the play developed. And sometimes I know to get an assist, you have to touch the puck. I get it. But how the play developed. And I saw so many videos of Chico working in those corners, checking, looking for the open man. I mean, this was the player of that era that, a lot of teams had. And I thought really his efforts were special. Tom, when do you get back to Chicago to get kind of involved to watching all this?
You're on mute.
I'm
Tom?
mute.
Yeah, Tom's on mute again. Yep, we got him on mute. He's having trouble with, let's see, we'll get him now. He's got to open up his mic again.
I would say probably 67 or so that I got back involved really heavier. So
Okay,
I'm
so
not-
now you see a team that basically in 67, Anakin Mackey, Esposito, Bobby Hall, Makita, Warham, all those guys, Moans, all them. You see a team that now is making a move in 67. A lot of people
Yes.
say they should have won the
Yes.
Stanley Cup in 67. Is that true?
very, very definitely. So,
Yeah.
but John, let's make this be about Tony and Carl, and I'm enjoying the listening and being here as part of this. So,
You got it. And if okay, we'll go that route. And anytime you want to chime in, you can.
Very good. Thank
Don't
you.
put
Yeah.
yourself on mute because you'll forget that you have to take yourself off.
Keep it open for sure.
I will say one thing, Chico, this last 2 years in the minors with Buffalo, the American Hockey League, he scored roughly 30 goals a season. And
right.
in one of the years, he had more points, goals, and assists than there were games played. So a lot of times we knew that he had scored a lot of goals. So we'd see him when we go, you should shoot more. How come don't you want to score some more goals? You scored all these goals in the minors. How come you're not shooting? And he had the perfect response. Why fire a pop gun when you've got a cannon?
When you got a cannon coming
A
down the
cannon
left
with
wing that had
Bobby
the
Hull.
number
Right.
9. Yeah, that cannon, right? Exactly. And I got a great Pierre Pilat story to fit into this thing too. But if he was on, that's a great thing to lead into, Tony and Carl. If he plays on another team, yeah, I think his numbers, he could have been a 20 goals, an average 20 goal scorer every year, because he really was he's basically being an enforcer for Hall along the boards and get the puck to Hall. No better guy to get the puck to Hall. Am I correct in saying that, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, so when we would talk to Bobby Hull, even in the later years, he just recently passed away, but
Yes.
I'd say within the last 2 or 3 years, he says, Chico and I had the same last name, Maki.
Right. Great line. Yeah.
Hull to Mackey, or Mackey to Hull. He said, we had the same last name. So we worked together. Chico Maki always would tell us that they would go to the visiting rinks early and pass the puck to each other just by yelling.
Sure. And to get the
yelling their name, and then they would roughly know where the other person was to feed them the puck.
Sure, and to get to know the visiting rink too, right? Exactly. Just to get there, because I mean, boards are livelier in different boards are deadened in some rinks, right? So that's a great point by you. Talking to him, because you guys had this personal level with him, Tony. Talking with him, like say after the season was over or during the season, did he ever feel like he was, underrated and for what he did? Did he ever come out and say, boy, I did this and I did that and I get credit? Could he have been an outspoken guy, or wasn't he?
I don't never remember him saying anything that he should be valued more than he was.
Right.
I think he was content with what he produced. And he had every reason to be content with it.
Exactly.
And like I said, these guys, they were all friends.
Sure.
So whether he scored or Bobby scored, Hawks scored. That's the way they looked at it.
A guy like Mackey knew the meaning of team, correct?
Right.
To look at, to keep that word. Carl, when you saw the early recollections of him, I mean, you guys both as brothers became fans of his. Was it fans because of just his demeanor or his hard work, or, just like me growing up, I wanted to be Tony Esposito. Did you like Mackey's style of play?
We liked the style of play, but we were fans more so just because how he treated Tony and I.
Sure.
So it had way more to do with that than it did with how he did on the ice.
Exactly.
He's just a special guy.
Right. You know, these numbers, when I'm looking at these numbers, and I think you guys got these same numbers, or I think he scored what, about 143 goals in his career, and I think he had about 292 assists. I could be
Right.
off here a little bit.
Right.
But 143 goals and 292 assists. Now, where I come from and where you guys come from, 292 assists and 143 goals. We're pretty close to like 500 points.
Right.
You know, so they say a goal is just as good as an assist. So, you know, can you imagine if this man would have really shot the puck more? He could have been probably a 300 goal scorer. I'm sure he had opportunity. Do you feel that he had opportunity, Tony?
I really believe what he said. You know, why fire a pop gun when you got a cannon?
When you got the
He
cannon.
probably figured, hey, odds are Bobby will score more often than I'm going to score.
Exactly.
And again, it wasn't important as to who scored. It was important that the Blackhawks scored.
How they won.
And that's
But,
the
you know,
way he looked at it.
It was more important to Tony and I that he scored.
Yeah, you
than
didn't
it
want
was to him if he scored.
to get slighted.
All right. So, you know, it wasn't the, you know, when we went over and there says you should shoot more, we didn't just say that one time and never mention it again. You know, we would basically hound him. Oh, you know, why don't you shoot? You had the
Right.
opportunity to shoot. Why didn't you shoot? You know, and he'd always give us the same answer.
Yeah, so it just wow, that's amazing just to hear that of an athlete, of course. And like I was always saying, and I had a great interview this past week with a gentleman who wrote a book about Terry Sawchuk. Those 6 teams, whether you were a defenseman, a forward, or a goaltender, and I tell this to my son, that was the cream of the crop. I mean, 6 teams to make 6 teams back in that generation. Now we have 35 teams. Right. You don't even know half the players' names. It's so watered down. I'll even tell my wife here some nights, I go, I don't even know who's on the Blackhawks. I'm so confused. So, you know, these were hardworking guys every night of the week. I got to ask you, Carl, and we'll go back to you for a second. Do you think he was the better penalty killer, or was he better 5-on-5? Because the stories of Chico killing penalties are legendary.
I don't know if you could pick one better than the other, but he was an outstanding penalty killer. And, you know, talk about, you know, he might have been able to score a lot more goals, things like that. You know, the Blackhawk fans are pretty knowledgeable fan base, and never once did we have any inkling that they didn't appreciate Chico's hard work. Sure. In the corners. He seemed to be like everybody's favorite, even though he wasn't Bobby Hull or Stan Mikita.
Right. Tony, do you ever remember where things would get a little hot there and the Blackhawks would have to kill a 5-on-3 in those days? Was Mackey the top forward when they were playing what is called the triangle? Would he be the only forward out there?
I believe so, but I don't really remember, quite frankly.
Carl, do you remember him being a lot of 5-on-3?
He was a lot on the 3 against the 5. You know, Tony mentioned that Bobby Hull didn't play too much defense, but he was a pretty good defensive player too. And a lot of times he would be the third guy along with the defenseman. So I would say Bobby Hull and Chico Maki would probably split time on when they're down 2 men.
Because I remember it either would be Chico and Nestorenko or
right.
Yeah, and I don't remember the other penalty. I know sometimes they would throw in the later 60s because he wasn't part of the early 60s, Lou Angotti. But right. Definitely I remember Nestorenko and Chico being the penalty killers.
Eric Nestorenko was you know, his one nickname was Elbows.
Elbows, yeah.
And Chico Maki, I think, was the one that referred to another nickname for him was Sonia Henny.
So yeah, he had
because when he would come out in the you know, when the whistle would blow and there's a timeout, he'd always be doing figure 8s out on the ice.
I'm going to use a word here, and this is how I described him from when I was a kid. I didn't start watching till 68, but from 68 to, let's say, 75, even in that last year when he retired and came back for a short time, he was truly, and tell me if I'm wrong, either one of you, Tony and Carl, he was really the model of consistency. You know, I mean, you knew what you were going to get. Chico Maki did not take a night off. Am I correct in saying that, Tony?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, skated hard, played hard, and gave his best every time.
Right.
You know, saying it, and I'll just repeat it. His best was what he considered to be the best for the team,
sure.
Not the best for him necessarily.
Right, right. He wasn't looking to read his press clippings the next day. Correct. Right.
No, right.
Only Tony and I were. We were again. We were interested in his press clippings. He wasn't.
Right.
Another thing, you know, he was.
It was a different era then. You know, it wasn't until much later that the Blackhawks really were on TV.
Right.
You know, so you couldn't watch them.
Did they cover all the? Let's go to that for a second. Did they cover all the home games? Not road games on WGN back in those days. All the road games?
No,
not all of them.
You know, Saturday night hockey, I think.
Yeah.
When they played on Saturday nights would be on WGN, but the rest of the games, you know, were not televised, and a lot of them. I'm not sure. I don't think all the games were broadcast on radio.
No, that I know for a fact.
So
because
Tony and I would, you know, let's say they're playing Toronto, and we would be turning the dial on our parents' Zenith radio, you know, a micro inch at a time, trying to pick up the Toronto broadcast or the Montreal broadcast.
Right.
I remember one time we picked up the Montreal broadcast, and you know, we hear about the La Rondelle. And next time we saw Chico Maki, he says, you know, who was that guy in the Canadians? La Rondelle. And La Rondelle is the puck.
Oh, La Rondelle is the puck. Okay. Well, you know, at least
but you know, you're talking about the Chico Maki, you know, with you know, he always gave maximum effort, right?
Yes.
You know, one thing that irritated Tony and I, when his effort was finished, you know, when it was time for him to get off the ice for a line switch, he would go right away.
Sure.
And Bobby Hull and Phil Esposito would hang around on the ice as long as they possibly could, and Chico would, you know, buzz to the bench.
Sure.
And you know, that sort of was also like a source of irritation. Yeah, I mean, for Tony and I, that you know, geez, he should stay on the ice, he could get a goal.
That's a great point by you, because if you look at some old YouTubes, Esposito and Bobby and other Blackhawks were out there for 2-3 minutes. Yeah. You know, nowadays you couldn't get away with a 2-3 minute shift. If you're out there for 40 seconds, that's a lot going on there.
Right.
As the years went on with Chico, did you see that he was still that same player, that same person? He never wavered from, you know, his work ethic, I wanted to say.
Oh, he was always consistent.
Yeah.
Always gave his best, always tried his hardest.
Right, exactly.
And again, success was not necessarily his success. The success was the team's success.
Sure. And then the low penalty, and of course he really wasn't a penalized player, because I'm looking at even his penalty minutes, they were low numbers. You know, for a guy that was going into the corners with some pretty big gentlemen in those, you know, he had to go face a Bobby Baun. He had to go up against a John Ferguson. You know, he had to go up a lot in those original 6 teams. There were some heavy guys out there that he had to go up against every other night, whether being in the stadium or on the road, you know.
Well, we have one story with that, you know, periodically, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, Chico would call us at home. Say, I've got extra tickets for tonight's game. You know, I'd like for you guys to go. Ask your mom and dad, see if it's okay. All right. So we'd ask our mom and dad. They say, yeah, you know, no problem. So he'd pick us up at our house in Cicero and drive us to the game.
Right.
We wait for him. He'd drive us home. One time he picks us up. His mother is in from Ontario. She's going to the game. So we're with his mother waiting for him. And during the game, he got into a fight with Doug Barkley with the Red Wings.
Red Wings.
All right. And we're going, oh boy, his mother's going to be really mad. And he got into a fight. All right. So we're waiting for Chico to come out of the locker room, and his mother's there with us. And Chico comes out. First thing, his mother, I've never been so proud of you in my life, Chico. So,
yeah. So she wasn't that upset about being him in the sins.
No, she was proud that he stood up for himself.
I want to.
Our mom and dad weren't upset that the school book that we took with us to the stadium to read between periods, we had never opened the book.
Oh, wow.
They didn't seem to be too upset about that either.
We got about 10-15 minutes left, but I want to hold up the book again, The Twins, A Journey of a Lifetime. We're visiting tonight with Tony and Carl Ruzicka, and the gentleman that you see at the bottom, the older brother, Tom Ruzicka. Tom is elected to we talked to him in the beginning. He's kind of listening in, and really nice to have him on too, because he knows of this whole journey. The book is great. We are depicting Chico Maki out of the book tonight. Because there's so many great things: Chicago Bears, the Runners, the Chicago Cubs, and of course the Chicago Blackhawks. And of course, if you right near the football there next to Hallis, right underneath, is a picture of Chico Maki that Tony and Carl drew up for the cover of the book. I'm sure 61 was gratifying as you come up as a rookie, you come up for 1 or 2 games and you win a Stanley Cup. It probably, for him, Chico Maki, it became like, wow, is this going to happen every year? But the one that I want to talk about before I let you guys go is one that still stings with me. I don't think the sting's ever going to go away, and Carl knows where I'm going with this. It's the 70-71 season, and it's Game 7 in the Chicago Stadium, and the Blackhawks have a 2-0 lead. And supposedly it was very hot that night in the old building, May 18th, 1971. And of course, a goal by Jacques Lemaire eluded Mr. Esposito, my idol. And all of a sudden, we went from a sunny day at West Madison to a hurricane that came through the stadium for the next 18 minutes. Does he talk about that game to you guys?
He only mentioned about it was the fact that we would ask him periodically what he thought about Tony Esposito, and he would be politely, would be sort of like a growl. So and I think that pertains to losing the puck and the smoke, too much smoke in the stadium.
Smoke or whatever was coming off the ice. Tony, do you remember anything? Did he talk about that maybe 1971 was a missed opportunity? Because that was, if they could have won that game.
I'm sure it was a missed opportunity, but, Chico, the way he operated, well, let's not focus on the past. Let's work on the present. So He never, best of my knowledge, he never really talked to us about it. Except the one time, sort of shrugging off Tony Esposito when we mentioned him. So, I will mention one other thing that's interesting.
Sure.
That's in the book. Carl and I would always have a football with us. All right. So one time we go to his house, ring the doorbell. We've got the football. We go, oh, come on up. Well, Phil Esposito was there, Murray Hall, winger, and Dennis DeJordy. And they go, let's go play football. So Carl and I went with Phil Esposito, Murray Hall, and Dennis DeJordy to 28th and East. And we played against them in touch football.
And this was a park in Berwyn, correct?
Yeah. Right. And let's just say that they were better hockey players than they were football players.
So basically, you guys were the Super Bowl champs, and they were playing like the Bears are playing now. Yeah.
Right. And the bottom line is, how many people can say they played touch football with Phil Esposito?
Right. Who we never would have thought would have gotten to the prominence that he did with the Boston Bruins. Correct. Right. I mean, and even to be with the goaltender Dennis DeJordy and the other gentleman.
So John, we're in the 7th and 8th grade, and we used to go play hockey at 28th and East, where we played football with Phil and Dennis and Murray, and they would flood the field in the winter, and we'd always tell Chico, come on over, meet us over there. We won't tell anybody who you are, but just come and skate with us.
Sure.
And one day we got a call. If you guys got the skates, I'll meet you over there.
Wow.
All right. And if so, okay, we think he's got a size 9 or a size 10 or something. He said, what size skate do you need? 6.5.
Jeez.
We couldn't produce it. And you think back about it now, that he was would have taken a big risk to play with us.
Right.
He could have
Turned an ankle,
crack on the ice or whatever it would be. And Tony and I, it's almost like almost to get sentimental about it right now, John. Thinking about, he must have really cared for Tony and I, that he would put himself out there,
right,
to be with the Twins.
I mean, here he's got this little bit of downtime, and he calls you guys up. I mean, you're pinching yourself,
yes.
to think, because for me, it had to be something for you guys. How were those remaining?
He'd always bring us, when they first came out with the curved blade stick.
Yes.
He brought us a Stan Mikita stick, a Bobby Hull stick, his stick, and he was just, I don't know, so kind to us. Right. One time he gave us a printed directory of where all the Blackhawks lived.
Wow. I mean, just you talk about that saying, memories to last for a lifetime. Just to end it with about Chico, how were those? Do you remember when he went through that little retirement because of an accident that had happened on the farm?
Yeah. So
how was that last year for him and the Blackhawks?
It wasn't very productive for sure. All right, and his oldest son Michael had got his foot caught in a combine in the farm that they had, so he was going to retire. And Billy Ray and Tommy Ivan asked him to come back, and that was another time. He called me. He comes back, but the team's on the road playing the game, and he's still not on the roster yet. And he called me, says, "Come on over. I'll go over. We'll go to Franklin Park and skate on the rink." Wow. So one guy skated and one guy shuffled. So I was the shuffler. Like Rocky, and on the ice with Adrian. So can I bring up a couple statistics though?
Yeah. Let's say, we can end it with the statistics for sure.
All right. So first of all, when he retired, he was one of fewer than a dozen players, Blackhawks, that had played 14 seasons with the Hawks.
Yes.
All right. So let's go. We mentioned about that he was he produced a lot of points when he was in the minors. All right. So he played with St. Catherine Teepees, the Buffalo Bisons, and the Sault Ste. Marie Thunderbirds.
Right.
He had 159 goals and 206 assists, 365 total points in 327 games.
Wow.
So he had more points than games. In the postseason in the minors, he had 21 goals and 30 assists, 51 points in 61 games.
Wow.
So, so he was a producer, all right? What we take the most pride in the fact is that, he was a defensive forward, like Tony mentioned, a protector of Bobby Hull, and he had a plus and minus rating. How many? If you're on the ice for a goal, you get a plus. If you're on the ice for the other team's goal, you get a minus.
Minus.
His plus and minus career was 144.
Wow.
Right? If you don't mind, I'll go over some other recognizable names.
Sure.
All right?
To give the comparison.
Yes. All right. So Patrick Kane, plus 21. Jonathan Toews, plus 148. Four pluses more than Chico. All right. His contemporaries, Cliff Coral, 105. Luann Gotti, -28.
Wow.
Eric Nestorenko, 49. In an era when they were fairly good in the early 90s.
Sure.
L. Secord, 7. Steve Larmer, 203. Dennis Savard, 103. Dirk Graham, 2. Eddie Olczyk, -65.
Wow.
So,
Don't
it
tell
gives
Eddie
you an
about
idea.
this podcast.
I mean, yeah, this is something that, again, is lost because everybody's looking to see who scored and who didn't, and scored and who didn't. But when you bring up something like that, a stat like that, I'm going to leave it like this.
I want to say one thing before we do it. We'll give a shout out to Chico's wife, Nancy Maki.
Yes.
Been-
Who I know we
still-
were
still a
trying to get
friend.
on here. Yes.
We're in touch with her, and she was certainly part of this friendship that we developed. And she was always receptive to us coming, and always would invite us in, and it was just wonderful for us. So we want to thank her as well.
Yeah, and Tony and Carl, that is great to bring her up because I know you guys were trying to get her on. I want to say thank you to
So
Tom.
when we first met Chico, he was relatively newly married. So, and we're 13, he was 23, and Nancy was 23.
Right.
They lived in this upstairs attic apartment, 3622 South Elmwood in Berwyn. Paid $100 a month rent. Tony described the small attic apartment. They ended up having 3 sons, Michael, Stephen, and Jimmy. Though 5 of them stayed in that small attic apartment
Amazing.
throughout his whole career.
Wow.
And Chico said at the end, he gave the landlords, Mr. and Mrs. Maid, it originally started at $100 a month. And near the end, he said, I felt a little bit funny about it, so I volunteered. I gave him 150.
50. Wow. Incredible.
And I would say one other thing, they always say they always were very grateful to the Blackhawk owners. And why would you think that is? Every year they got a TV.
Yeah. The little things that mean
Yeah.
a lot, right?
They bought him a TV.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I want to thank both you, Tony, Carl, and Tom for listening. Tom, if you want to get off I know your mic's up. Real quick, I want to just say this. If anybody's interested in seeing how hard Chico Maki worked, there is a game. It's Game 5. You can get it on YouTube, 1971 against the New York Rangers in the semifinal round. It's Game 5, where Robert Marvin, Bobby Hall scores an overtime goal around 10:30 at night off Ed Jockerman. But if you watch the first 2 periods of that game on YouTube, some of the highlights, just type in Rangers Chicago 1971, you will see what type of a player Chico Maki was, like how tonight the Ruzikas described them: hardworking, consistent, and unsung. Gentlemen, I truly thank you for tonight, and I hope we can do another one. This was fantastic. Tom, appreciate you coming on. Carl, Tony.
Thank you.
Hope you see you guys down the road.
All right. Thanks again.
Good night.